And when you look under the landers, you can see sort of these black radial streaks from the surface being scorched a little bit by the.
I don't see that anywhere.
That's in one of the pictures, I believe. I've seen it.
I've looked at every single one of them. I've never seen anything remotely close to that.
I might be wrong.
No, Phil, you aren't wrong. There are pictures showing radial striations coming out from underneath the LEM, which is just what we would expect to see, with fine dust being blown away by the LEM exhaust.
These are the photos that Astrobrand is referring to. I hardly call these radial streaks. Due to the enormous spread of the LEM exhaust, we should expect these streaks to continue on for many, many meters. And as we saw, there are dust grains directly under the engine bell, which, as we established earlier, is the exact opposite of what we'd expect to see under an engine with pressure 3 times that of a leaf blower. Astrobrand had nothing to say along these lines, other than thanking me for supplying this photo showing minuscule streaking. Somehow, he thinks this photo backs up his case. And as all propagandists have insisted, we know the lunar module's engine should have left a disturbance visible from outer space. Now, thanks largely to NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, we can emphatically say that it didn't.
Oh, well, good job, Jarrah. Alright, this photo from LRO doesn't seem to show it. However, these other photos do, 2 of which you chose not to show in your video. I wonder why.
Do I really need to say it again? Oh well, here goes. These 2 photos were taken at different angles, which is why only one of them shows the halo, which we know is just the brightness of a crater, not the disturbance caused by the LEM, and these Chandrayaan-1 photos show nothing but the same bright crater photographed by Selene, plus 2 additional smaller bright craters that also have nothing to do with Apollo 15. Astrobrand added an annotation to his video, in which he says this.
JW claims he showed them in some other video. They weren't in this video though, and this is the only video I'm commenting on. These photos were very relevant, as he needs to debunk all 3, not just one, in order to win his irrelevant arguments.
Really? Well, let's see. The Clementine splotch? Just a bunch of impact craters? Guess that makes that one debunked. The JAXA halo? Just a bright reflection coming from a few natural craters. Guess those photos are also debunked. The Chandrayaan-1 halo? The exact same bright crater photographed by Selene. That means those photos are debunked too. And finally, the Apollo 15 images showing the area before and after. The one showing the halo was allegedly taken looking straight down into the crater. The one showing no halo was allegedly taken at an angle, so it wouldn't have been able to see the reflection. So that makes all photos debunked. Guess that means I win that argument. And the argument is hardly irrelevant, given that propagandists and believers in the moon landings cling to these pictures as proof for their cause, as though it were the holy grail of all proof. Before we wrap this one up, we will look at Phil Webb's video discussing the same subject. To be perfectly frank, having picked Clean Astrobrand's video on this subject, there is not much left to comment on in Webb's videos. But there are a few points Webb brought up that I feel are worth replying to.
The point we need to emphasize here is that the study was not a hunt for Red October. They weren't looking for the Apollo 15 or any other Apollo landing site. We already know where they landed. The purpose of the study was to look for mineral deposits on the moon. The black spots in the photos they studied represent a local abundance of iron oxide. That's all. The article doesn't explain any of that, of course. It doesn't go into that kind of detail. The article is poorly written, it repeats the same phrases several times, and lacks any technical quality whatsoever. It doesn't even qualify as science for the masses.
Would you prefer this document by Drs. Kraslovsky and Shakuratov that we looked at earlier? The Space.com article uses many direct quotes from this document, and even paraphrases it a little. This article doesn't say anything about trying to detect iron oxide. Webb also insists that these dark splotches will not register period in any unprocessed Clementine photos, or any LRO photos, or any other photos.
You won't see the black spot in any unprocessed Clementine photos, or in any LRO photos, or in any other photos.
Yet in this document, Kreslovsky and Shakuratov pitched the Clementine photos against earlier photos taken by Lunar Orbiter 3, in which the dark halos surrounding craters B and C clearly register as white in these visible white photos.
The map of the parameter eta of the phase dependence of brightness shows several distinctive diffuse features in the flat surface. The most pronounced feature is a diffuse halo shown with the left arrow in Figure 3. It is associated with an impact crater shown with the arrow in Figure 4, taken from Lunar Orbiter 5 frame 105M. The well-expressed inner part of the diffuse halo has a radius of 0.7 kilometers. A faint extension of the halo can be traced up to 2 kilometers from the center. Smaller and less pronounced halo, the upper arrow in Figure 3, is also associated with an impact crater, the arrow in Figure 5, the same LO frame. Both craters are fresh because they have sharp slope breaks, Figures 4 and 5, and are bright, Figure 1, due to the regolith immaturity. The halos extend much farther from the crater centers than the increased albedo, immature soil. There are some other fresh craters of comparable size in the scene, which do not have any halo in Figure 3. For example, the crater in the upper left part of Figure 4. A small dark spot, lower right arrow in Figure 3, is not associated with any fresh crater, but exactly coincides with the Apollo 15 landing site. This object is very small, and we cannot prove with absolute reliability that the dark spot is not an occasional result of some superposition of noise realizations in the images used. However, our screening of all the images, absence of similar spots in the scene, and exact coincidence of the spot with the landing site made us sure that this is a real feature. At the phase angle range in effect, the steepness of phase dependence of brightness is thought to be controlled predominantly by the shadow hiding mechanism. In the frame of this mechanism, for the same albedo the lower values of eta, the darker shades in Figure 3, correspond to a regolith surface, which is flatter at scales of 0.1 to 10 millimeters. At these scales, the regolith structure is controlled by micro-impacts. The uniform value of eta corresponds to a saturation of the micro-impact effect. Anomalies in eta mean relatively recent local damage of the regolith structure. For Apollo 15 landing site, the damage within the radius of 50 to 150 meters around the landing site is probably caused by the lander jet. For the fresh impact craters, we think about several agents causing the regolith structure damage. Number 1, shock and/or seismic and/or sound waves from the impact could shake the regolith and change the fluffy structure. Number 2, distal ejecta could be dense enough to influence the structure, but not too thin to mix the regolith and expose the immature material. In these cases, the fresh craters without the anomalous halo exist, because the timescale of establishing the equilibrium structure is shorter than the timescale of regolith maturation and the timescale of crater form softening. Number 3, gas that surrounds icy projectiles could affect the structure. Additional study is necessary to evaluate plausibility and/or importance of these factors.
Pardon me if I missed anything, but reading Dr. Kreslovsky's document, it doesn't sound to me like they were looking for iron oxide or mineralogy, but rather the geometry in the lunar regolith. Also, judging by their comparison of the Clementine photos with LO5 photos, it seems these splotches do appear in the unprocessed visual light spectrum. This is contrary to what Webb claims in his video. It is important to note that Kreslovsky, like many other NASA followers, say this damage was caused by Apollo 15 exhaust. He compared the other two splotches with photos taken by LO5, showing the brightness around these craters. But I wonder why he neglected to show any pre-Apollo photos of the Apollo 15 landing site, which clearly show a cluster of craters grouped together in the exact same location where he found splotch A.